Hey, Browns getting their asses whooped. Super Bowl. Had to say that at the top of the show. Anyway, if you turn the channel, you've come here, you've come to the right spot. Be uplifted. Welcome to the Shaker Heights. Experiences may vary. Yes, it's Sunday, December 8th. This is our 40th episode. 40th. Let that sink in. So, coming to the stage, before then, we had to move over to the Southington Rapid stop on the Green Line, Shaker Boulevard. He's coming to the stage right now. You've known him as James Levy, or Levy. I'll let him clear that up. You put a doctor in front of his name. And the man is about progression. Taking chances on new thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring to the stage James Levy.
Hey.
There we go.
Eric,
Welcome aboard.
Thank
Welcome
you.
aboard. Good to see
Glad
you.
to be here.
Where you at?
It's
In
Levy.
Wisconsin.
Levy,
right?
by the way.
Levy, yeah.
Yes.
Levy. Because I run into some Levies up in New York, so, you know.
Well, I think the East Coast prefers Levy. Believe it or not, I worked for a guy that had my dad's name, Larry Levy. He pronounced it that way.
Yeah.
Even crazier, in the department I was in, there was a guy named James Levy. So
Wow.
I was the Levy. That's how I distinguished myself. But
This is a side
that
note.
was in Long Island. Jews on Long Island. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that brings to mind, when I was in the Army, there was a white Tolliver and a black Tolliver, and spelled the same way. And so whenever they would call for us, they'd be like, "Where's white Tolliver?" or "Where's black Tolliver?"
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And you guys just roll with it. That's good.
Yeah, we just rolled with it. Yeah, Team Green. Man, welcome. Good to see you after all these years.
Me too. I'm happy to see both of you.
Yeah. Scott Griffin shout you out,
All right, Scott.
Because I think one of the few times we did see each other back, it was like over a decade ago. I think we were all out with like Lisa Fuller for dinner or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. And then you really helped us out. That was for an exhibit we did at the Schomburg in Harlem.
Right.
That was
right.
was probably maybe close to 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we'll get into that, but we want to take it back to the beginnings.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Yes. So tell us about how you wound up in Shaker. Your family? Are you like multi-generational Shaker fam?
That's a great question. I like it. I like, where do people come from, which relates to my work actually. But well, my dad's family, Jewish immigrants during the Russian pogroms. I don't know exactly where my grandfather came from, his family originally. I think somewhere in Russia, but he was born in England, probably on the route. And they ended up coming maybe through Baltimore, but got to Cleveland pretty quickly. And same with my grandmother, who was, I think, born in the States, but she came from Poland. Okay. But she was, so they were a Cleveland family. And, it's funny because my grandmother's family is very religious. I think my great-grandfather was a rabbi. My grandmother brought up Orthodox, my grandparents pretty conservative. And so they went from Cleveland, and I have actually been tracking their house, my dad's childhood house. And it went from, also, by the way, this is about exactly the work I do, but it went from if you look on Google, it went from family house to abandoned, boarded up, and now there's grass. So the house is gone. I wanted to go back and visit it, and it's not there anymore. But they went, when he was an adolescent, he had an older brother. They went to Cleveland Heights. So he was a Cleveland Heights kid, I'm sorry to say. But that was his. So he was, I guess, a couple generations in Cleveland. And then my mom was not. She grew up in New York City, and she was not Jewish. And so when she ended up in Cleveland after college, she wanted to be a writer, and she was a reporter for the Cleveland Press in the 50s. And when she passed away, one of her best friends who worked with her said, I think your mom was the first woman in Cleveland to be on the police beat as a reporter, and including the Plain Dealer, which is something I didn't know. So she met my dad through that woman actually who worked with her at the Cleveland Press, and they got married and stayed. And then I actually was born in Cleveland Heights. So, I was born in University Hospital, but I was my first 5 years in Cleveland Heights, and then Shaker.
Now, do you have any siblings?
There's 3 of us. Nope, I'm third of 4. My older sister Alex was class of '82. Her senior year had an accident that was pretty devastating, but she's still doing okay. Has lived a hard life, but she's a great person, and she lives in Boston. And then my brother Seth, who some people might know because I feel like he was a president of student council in every school he went to. Anyway, he's 2 years older, so he was class of '82, and he's in Portland, Maine now. And then me, and then my younger sister Meredith, who was class of, what would that have been, '87. She lives in Boston too. So actually, Gabe, you mentioned earlier, before we went on the air here, that I was, you asked if I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was, and we just moved. You probably don't know this. We just moved to Providence, Rhode Island. So this summer. So I am near my family now. We're all in New England.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Good pizza in Rhode Island.
Oh yeah. I've had. That's true. There is. I've had two different stores. Which one do you know?
I don't know anyone specifically, but the times I've gone through there, I've gone with people to places, and then also just reading up on the Italian immigrant history of migrating up to Rhode Island, and with the pizza and other things.
Oh yeah, the Italian presence in Providence is pretty strong.
Yeah. So, wow. So man, that's a trip. Multi-generational Shaker. Every couple of years, somebody was graduating.
Bevy of levies.
Yeah. There you go. So,
you can play. Yep.
Tell us about Boulevard, man. Like, who's you roll with, and what was elementary school like for you?
Man,
any stories?
We're all the same age, right? I mean, we kind of grew up, and this came up when we did that exhibit. Like, whether this was true or not, I think a lot of us think of those years as kind of idyllic. Not everybody in Shaker. I don't know, Eric, about you. I know that, Gabe, we've talked, but like, I mean, what did our parents move for? So many moved for, the schools, the houses, the parks, and racial integration. And so you have this, at least, looking back, I have a lot of different things to say about this, but there was this, this sense of diversity at the same time that you had really tight communities, at the same time that you had great schools. And I think Boulevard was very much like, for me in my memory, it was very much, a pretty traditional, but good feeling school. I loved my teachers, most of them. I had my best friend throughout elementary school, I would say, was Lawrence Antoine. He lived on Endicott. So if you went Endicott to Larchmere, cross Larchmere, you'd get to either the Freimeyers or the Deaners. I think the Deaners, and he would go through the Deaners, and then their backyard abutted our backyard. So that was our house. So then you get to me. And he was awesome, man. Lawrence was like king of the class in every class. He was the fastest kid, which meant a lot in elementary school. He did a 50-yard dash. He was the smartest, and really creative. And that's where we connected. We did a lot of creative things together. I think in 4th grade, maybe, I don't remember, 5th grade, we had a TV show.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There was this teacher named Miss Singleton, Miss Singleton, who had us do a newscast. And so Lawrence and I and a couple others, Andy Straffen was part of that, put on this show, I think once a week or something. It was awesome. But Lawrence and I bonded over a lot. Yeah, he was a really good buddy. And then Brian Pappas, Andy Straffen are the 2 others that come to mind. Matt Freimeyer, as I said, lived behind me. He was 2 years younger, so class of '86, but we were buddies too, even though we had a 2-year gap. Yeah.
Wow.
Good people.
Yeah. I saw Lawrence. We saw Lawrence. He came to the reunion this past July. Um, yeah, I guess L.A. where he's at and stuff.
So this is really funny about LA. So Lawrence and I, we had a ping pong table in my basement, and Lawrence and I would spend hours playing ping pong. Lawrence is a great athlete. I don't know if you know this about him, but
I mean, I knew about his tennis game. He
yeah.
had tennis. Yeah,
Well, when we played, yeah, he could play tennis, and that's the sport he chose. But when we played football, you know, at night or in the backyard or whatever with all the gang, this shaker thing, um, he was amazing. He was just like I really admired. He was a good person to push me athletically, I think. But we played ping pong, and we would play. This will tell you something about Lawrence and me and our relationship. We would play for hours, and because there's just two of us, we would get bored. So we set up tournaments with like elimination, seeded
yeah, yeah,
tournaments, and to
yeah,
do that, we had to
yeah,
have different characters. So each character played in the style of the character.
yeah,
So like
yeah.
my best character was I think it was slamming James, and I would just slam everything, and that was my I would win. We had goofy characters that were always lost on purpose. His best one I think was the LA spin for like
Okay.
Lawrence Antoine, and so he took on
Yeah,
this LA thing, and it kind of lasted like LA, and he ended up in LA. So I take credit for that for him and
yeah,
his.
yeah, yeah. You planted the
So,
seeds early.
so is that where your acting prowess began with ping pong playing in the
Yeah,
basement?
maybe. Well, that's kind of what I mean by Lawrence and me. We had those little realistic tape recorders.
Yeah,
We would do radio shows and lots of characters. Yeah, I had friends that got into very theatrical. Even my family, like just geeky theater, geeky stuff, like listening to musicals and the whole family listened to Godspell when we were little. I don't want to
yeah.
reveal too much about how much of a geek I
No,
was.
man. No, that fly
Yeah, no,
that.
I'm kidding. It
Yeah,
was it was
yeah,
great. So yes, Eric, I think that's very astute. We would, there's a lot of role playing and that. I loved it.
Yeah, we were a theater family. We didn't have any actors, but we went to everything that came to town. And I think on one of these podcasts, I was talking about how Beatlemania. My mom took me to see Beatlemania,
Well,
and
that's good.
I went to see. I really got excited about reading Mark Twain in junior high
Oh,
at Byron,
that's neat.
and went to
Oh
see
wow.
Mark Twain Tonight with Hal Holbrook. I
Did
asked to
you
go.
really?
Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah,
He's the guy, man. I don't know, Gabe. You know Hal Holbrook?
Oh yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
been a lot of
yeah,
Mark Twain interpreters, but Hal Holbrook is like the god
yeah.
of that. That's amazing that you saw him.
I know him
yeah.
mostly from cinematic stuff. Like 3 days.
Oh
I
yeah,
think yeah, 3 days of the Condor. Yeah, just a
right.
fine actor.
Yeah. That's
Were,
cooler.
were you in plays at Boulevard? Did you? I lived in the Lomond area, but I started out in Montessori school. So
Oh,
even though I lived in the area, did you do plays in? Did people do plays in elementary school?
I'm trying to think if there was I don't
We
remember. I
did.
mean, they did. I think it depended on the year and maybe what parents or the PTA or whoever, or the teacher. I'm trying to think if there was. I remember little performances and skits. I don't remember getting in front of like the auditorium and doing a play. Oh, that's not true. We did little play. Here's my first acting experience. You want to know if really this is I learned a lesson here. You remember Richard White? So he was in my
Yeah,
grade at Boulevard too. Okay,
his
so
feet splayed out when he walked. That's what I remember about Richard.
oh, interesting. I don't even remember that. Well, Richard, early on, like I'm talking like kindergarten, first grade, he was kind of a troublemaker, and I was drawn to
Really?
that. Yeah, yeah, I was drawn to that. And one of my earliest memories actually is he and I get into a fight, and like this is my only memory of actually fist fighting, like literally, like cartoons. The two kids are fighting, and it becomes
Yeah,
just a ball, like a
Hmm.
basketball. That was what it was like. And I remember in this, I don't even know what prompted it, but the bus driver came up and he grabbed me by the belt loop and Richard White by the belt loop and carried the two up to the principal's office.
Wow.
yeah,
And I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was drawn to this. So I think it was first grade or second grade. There was a play, and it was like there were townspeople, and there was like I don't know the mayor or something, and then there was the trees. And I got cast as a townsperson, and Richard White got cast as a tree. And I was so jealous and bummed that I wasn't with Richard White that I convinced the teacher to make me a tree. And it was my just desserts because she sent us. Here's what we did: she put us in the back. They
yeah.
put green crepe paper on our arms, and we sat there like this, with our arms out for the entirety of the play. It was the worst role I've ever had. But that was
Oh
probably
man.
my first time on stage.
Were you in plays, Gabe? Were you in any plays?
I mean, there were some plays at Ludlow. I don't actually recall myself being in them, but I do remember I think our sixth grade class put on Oklahoma because
Oh,
Brooke Tippett was like one of the lead singers of that. So whenever I hear of Oklahoma, I think of Brooke Tippett singing
Oh, that's interesting.
Oklahoma.
was there a band or did you play the record player?
I think
How
they
did
played the
that?
record player or something. Yeah.
You know, we did Oklahoma at Shaker, and I was in Oklahoma at Shaker in high
Really?
school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. As an aside, that song takes on a different meaning for me. I have a project about a great uncle who was lynched out in Oklahoma.
Oh man, dude.
And so every time I hear Oklahoma and hear the lyrics and everything, it takes a different tone for me now.
Was
Yeah.
that it wasn't part of Tulsa or something. It was much later. It was
Yeah,
in
no, actually it was 1911, October
before Tulsa.
22nd, 1911. Yeah, so it was before the Red Summer of 1919 in Tulsa. But yeah,
Wow,
that's
that's
my
intense.
yeah,
Yeah.
made the cover of New York Times back in the day. And
Wow.
yeah, so Oklahoma.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a different
Yeah.
meaning for sure than, where the wind comes sweeping down the
Down the
plains.
plains, and that's real. I did basic
Yeah.
training out there, Oklahoma. So
Yeah.
Well, my foray to acting, and it stopped until I did MASH in Michigan. They needed a black guy to play Spear Chucker Jones or whatever.
oh yeah,
Hmm.
was that Fred Williams's character or Jim Brown's character in the movie that Robert Altman did?
I don't remember the movie. I don't think I've ever seen the movie, but
Yeah.
I was him when, like, I don't know, about 15 years ago. And
Wow.
my first acting role was uh, someone took a trip to DC, and I don't know if you remember Thomas Brasitis. He worked for
That sounds.
Plain Dealer. He was the the political liaison,
Yeah. That I can see the byline. I know. Yeah.
and his
Got it.
son Mark Brasitis. They must have been thinking about moving to DC because the whole family moved to DC. He brought back a Revolutionary War hat. So any prop that anyone had, in Montessori school, we took an interest towards that. So I said, let's do a play about the Revolutionary War. So I was Paul Revere, and Mark, the son of Thomas Brasitis, was my horse. And I said,
It's
I
better than a
said,
tree.
and I remember the line: one if by land, two if by sea, I on the opposite shore shall be, ready to ride to spread the alarm to every village, middle, section, and farm. And then I got jumped on my horse, and that was how long it lasted.
That's fantastic. Did the horse have any
Oh,
lines?
And then rolled over, I guess. I
Yeah,
wish we had
it was
tape
cool.
of it, No one taped
Yeah,
anything back
I
then.
mean,
I know.
imagine if we had video at the level we have now. Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Could be
You can't
good,
go to
bad,
a
or ugly.
Yeah, you can't go to a concert without somebody. More people are taping the concert than they are.
Oh, I know. It's just weird. Everything's mediated through the screen. It's yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I get it, but it's kind of annoying too.
Yeah.
So Jamie, so we go from Boulevard, get to Woodbury. So what was Woodbury like for you? And yeah,
I mean, Woodbury was. Listen, I got to just say, like, it's not like everything was perfect, but I feel really good about my education all up and down Shaker.
yeah,
And it's so great. I think one of the great things about Facebook and what we're doing now is just that Shaker people are connected, and we're
yeah,
reconnecting. We're meeting each other even later in life. Like,
right,
oh yeah, you
right,
were in the same class, but I never talked to you. It's really cool. And so Woodbury was the next step, and
yeah,
obviously it was just a much bigger school, and so there was a lot of, and you're just entering adolescence. I mean, there was a lot of stuff on the line. It was like loaded times, and
hmm,
this is when friendships are shifting around, and
Yeah.
like
right,
Lawrence and we sort of were friends in junior high school, but we kind of like broke up, so
hmm,
we drifted apart, and that was actually painful for me. But you make new friends. So what was it like? I mean, I think my earliest entrance into Shaker began probably with football.
Okay.
I met Steve Turoff, and so Steve Turoff and I hung out a lot, and a couple other guys during that, like not freshman, 7th, 8th grade, 9th a little bit. So I remember like football team putting on pads, and and these guys. Did either of you do? Derek, did you do football, or Gabe? Did you do football? You didn't do, Gabe. I don't remember.
I did JV briefly. I didn't stay
Okay.
with the season. Yeah, I tried to put it
Okay.
that way.
I had Osgood Schlatter. I was just talking about that. Calcium deposits on my knees. So I didn't play. And then by the time I realized, oh, I can play football, I saw them doing the two-a-days, and I would watch John Miller ride his bicycle back and forth, and I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I don't want to get back to school this early and then be doing two-a-days in 80-degree weather. I said, nope, not doing it.
Yeah. Right. When you got to the high school level, it got really serious. And we had a really good, 1,500 kids in our school or something. And
it's crazy to think about it. We had a big class.
And state championships in various sports. I mean, it was serious. And yeah, I think same with me, Eric. Like it was when I looked at, plus it's not like I'm an amazing athlete and I was not big. So going into football, but when I saw, oh, wow, season starts in mid-August or something, and it's like, yeah, I did. Yeah. But throughout junior high school, I played. It was really fun. I love playing football. But yeah, man. I mean, there's so much to say about Woodbury, but I guess.
Were you involved with the student council even in junior high, or?
I actually wasn't. I'm not sure why. I did. We had a fake junior high school in Boulevard. Student council in Boulevard. It was called, for some reason they got rid of student council, and I don't remember why. My brother had done it. And my sister. I think my sister was president of student council. Then my brother, and then it came to me, and they didn't have it anymore. And there was a good political reason, and I wish I could remember what it was. But then they had this thing called I think it was SAC, which is like Student Activity Council.
Yeah.
I remember. Did you guys have that? Was that a district-wide thing? But anyway, and so I became it wasn't even president, something else, but I kind of ran for that and did that. But then by the time junior high school came around, I don't think I was involved in it at all. No, I wasn't. And I wasn't involved in theater either. We didn't really have much theater at Woodbury either, right? We had talent shows.
Yeah, that was about it.
That's about it. But yeah, here's what I would say about Boulevard. Woodbury, which Gabe will know because we talked a lot about this. But I think just racially, like if you look at Boulevard, and I say I was best friends with Lawrence. Well, how many black kids were there in my? I say it was integrated or diverse neighborhood, but really, like Boulevard was one of the whiter schools. I think if there were 20 of us or however many in that class, maybe 4 guys were black. Couple, Allison Beard, I could list people, but then obviously Woodbury, it all radically changes. And so at the same time, like if you study race as I have, or you even look at old documentaries of Shaker Heights from the 50s and 60s, right? Mm-hmm. They've made several of these. It's always junior high school. And this isn't just Shaker, it's nationwide. Yeah, it's always junior high school. Things change, friendships end, people start to see race. And so I would say one of the things, and this isn't always bad, right? There's a sort of a graduation, I think, at least for me in junior high school, becoming racially aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. I think that's how I'd put it, for better and for worse for people. And I certainly heard some of my white friends say, not everybody, but every now and then say crazy shit, that you would just cancel them for. Right. It's almost shocking to think of it now. Right. But, and just, I don't know if talk about locker room. Being a white boy, I heard that phrase a lot and not said with a lot of affection always, right?
Oh yeah, that's not a term of endearment for sure.
So, but it's all the math of being in junior high school, and it's complicated. So
I think a lot of the socioeconomic stuff starts to boil to the surface at that point.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. For
I
sure.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I totally agree with that.
And you think about the lunchroom, that probably Eric can speak to it about at Byron. You see that segregation getting set up
Oh yeah,
in the
Exactly.
lunchrooms. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Like, what's that book? Why do all the black kids or why do all the white kids eat together in the lunchroom? There's a book that has that title or something.
yeah,
So it's not just a Shaker thing. And then, of course, unfortunately, at Shaker, it was an L-shaped cafeteria, which
yes,
meant you could have those two wings.
yeah,
Um, but like people like Gabe, I mean, and Eric, I don't know who you were in Shaker. I
that's
don't.
okay. Nobody did.
But
So
no, but I just mean like what role you played. But I know that Gabe was starting in junior high school. I mean, there were certain people that were like these bridges, and Gabe was one of
well,
them.
the cliques had been formed, and the only way that I knew kids that went to school, well, like when I went to Byron, it was a shock because I was used to calling my teachers by their first name, and they were
Oh, right,
hippies, and
the Montessori, right?
it was in Cleveland Heights. So I would be red-eyed and scared. And I remember the first day of junior high, my mom ran out of the house with her hair on fire. She goes, "It's your first day. You're not going to fail the homework. What's homework?" And Elton Jackson and people would look at me and point at me like, "What's wrong with you?" And I had some discussions at the reunion. Lisa Stewart and
Yep.
Joy Taylor. And I gave them a friendly reminder. I said, "Yeah, I remember when you were pointing at me in the lunch line, laughing at me, and put me down for looking all sad and everything." And they apologized to me, but kids are cruel,
Oh yeah, kids are cruel.
really cruel, especially at the union of all these people coming from different elementary schools and then finding their way and their personality. Yeah, man, it was really tough for me, and especially I would eat by myself, and even in high school.
Oh really?
Yeah, I would go. Charles Chambers would be in the library playing chess, and so would Danny Tepper. I didn't know how to play chess, and I would just go in there and sit because I had no place to go at lunchtime. Yeah, it was
Oh,
pretty
Eric.
sad. It was pretty
Yeah.
sad. I don't mean to take the show away from you, but that was
No,
my experience.
it's the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wish I had, especially knowing that you were like you had your own theater stuff. I wish we had connected in high school.
Yeah. I wish I had gotten more. Looking back, I would have gotten into looking at the things that I'm involved with or I gravitate towards. I would have been more into debate team and acting and that type of stuff. I played baseball in Byron. That was my coming of age. I played my ninth grade year, but didn't make the team at high school. But yeah, that was my chance for socializing
Yeah.
because
Right.
we always used Little League. That was the place where everyone sort of met each other and found their grounding and decide whether they're going to pursue athletics. And I always remember Caleb Nelson. He
Oh
was,
yeah.
but everyone's parents threw them into the marsh of Shaker Boys League, and that's where we all met.
That's
And
true.
yeah.
That's
Did you
true.
play? Were you in Shaker Boys League? Did your parents make
Yeah,
you play?
I did. I'm trying to think if I did it only 1 year though. But when did we start? Fourth or fifth grade or something? Does that sound right?
yeah. Like
Um,
junior B, it's like fourth grade or fifth grade.
So I did junior A. I was on the God. I'm trying to remember now. It's a Red Wings. Would that be right? Red something or Red Stars. What the hell were we?
Redstones.
Red Stones. Okay, thank you.
That's a weird. I haven't said that in years. I
Couldn't even remember
pictured
it.
it.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Good job. So it was junior A, and Ty Bassett was on my team, and Keith Asamoto,
Yeah,
and who else? Oh, Danny Wyman, who was our
Yeah,
pitcher, and I played catcher, and he could crush it, man.
yeah.
In fourth grade, my hand still hurts. It's like
Mhm.
yeah.
I'm
Wyman.
trying to think
Yeah.
of other people on that team. And Keith's father, Asamoto, what was his first name?
Ken Asamoto.
Ken Asamoto. He was our coach.
Yeah, great
Um,
coach. Great
yeah.
coach.
I have a
Great
picture of me and Danny Wyman on my lawn just before the All-Star game, and he was wearing a Redstones
Yeah, there you go.
shirt, and I was wearing my bow marks.
Oh, so you guys were all stars. Yeah, well, not me, but it was fun. Yeah, baseball was fun too.
So, James, like, making the transition from Woodbury, obviously to Shaker, what was, looking back, like the work, the work that you do now, was there any indication of that when you were coming through school or like, leaving
At that
junior high,
point.
going to Shaker?
That's a great question. I mean, yeah, I think so. I'll tell you the two threads that I would say, three threads for you're saying what was happening in Woodbury or / Shaker that sort of leads to where I am now.
Yeah.
Okay, there's three threads then. I'm going to say this. One is the race stuff. Like I said, I really think no matter what background you are, no matter how open or closed you are, I don't think you can get through Shaker Heights in the years, at least that we were going through, without becoming very aware of race.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Right.
Very
So
true.
good or bad, who you are racially, you have to figure that out. You have to grapple with it.
Yeah.
And I think I have carried that with me because, just as the, fast forward for a second. I mean, I got a PhD in history, and I was trained in African American history. Right. There's a lot of white people who've gone through Shaker who have variations on that, like Eric Hansen. I think he was on your Eric and I hung,
Yeah.
Bob Fry, in high school.
Yeah.
Eric studied, I don't know if he finished. I think he got a master's in African American studies at Yale or something. Like,
Yeah.
How did you gravitate? Well, we got to go back to the high school experience, but yeah, what attracted you to that?
I mean, Eric, it's a question I've been trying to figure out my whole life, because I have answers to it, but I don't know if any of them are right. I talk about Lawrence sometimes, like that he's just one person, but somehow the breakup of friendships happening in junior high school is really hard. It's heartbreaking. I call it a breakup as a kind of a joke, but it's actually heartbreaking.
No, it's real. It's real. It's real.
And, Lawrence and I split apart for all kinds of other reasons. And there were white kids that I was friends with. We also split apart. So it may be unfair to say that was about race. And yet you guys both know, I mean, there's stuff that people do that kind of the plates sort of shift and all that. And a lot of it is informed by race. So it's for a white person who's brought up liberal, good liberal Jewish family or whatever. And you think about post George Floyd and all this, you can just, we've seen it kind of in high definition, but there's a lot of I think there's a lot of white people, period, in this country who are trying to figure out who they are racially and all that still. And we're trying to deal with white guilt or whatever it is. And I think for people from Shaker, we were a few steps beyond that because we had it for our whole lives. And so it was a combination of really being exposed to Black culture, but also feeling like a little bit on the outside, or there was something that wasn't quite resolved. And so there's a fascination, I think, with learning. I mean, what is knowledge but a way to sort of gain some kind of control of your life? That's one way that people do it. And so there might be a little, entitlement in that that's kind of can be questionable. Like, who are you to do this? I've certainly, I grapple with whether I should do it at all because, it's not, in some ways, it's not my place. And I've been challenged for, wait, did you take that job as a professor and a Black candidate didn't get it because of you? Right. And I don't think there's a bad questions. And when I finally made peace with what I was doing, that's what I came up with, was that I don't know if who has the right to do this. I know that if I'm teaching white students, then they're being trained to do the same thing that I'm doing, right? If you're going to teach African American history to a bunch of white students and Black students, the white students are kind of, they act like professors, right? Scholars. That's what we do in college. We practice writing about, in the case of history, we practice speaking out loud about it. That's what a professor does. So if my white students are in that role, they're basically doing what I'm doing. For the Black students, you also don't want Black students to just assume because they're Black, somehow they have to be automatically interested in this stuff or more expert. And yet the question of who you are as a teacher is hugely valid, right? And so the way I made peace with it is I said, you know what? I walk into a room with a question mark over my head. This white guy who's teaching Black history, what the hell is going on? And then we use that productively. We use
Mhm.
that because good teaching is
Yeah.
about opening questions, not telling people what
Yes.
to think. Right. And so this is, and it worked well. And if somebody wants to challenge me, I actually like uncomfortable situations. So I like being challenged, So that, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, Eric, but I think it's related. It's sort of an academic version of white kids being into hip hop.
Mhm.
It's something that's awkward and weird, and yet it's a huge phenomenon. And I think all of us who are in various versions of this have to be transparent about it, like open to really doing some self searching.
Well, a term for that, which I bring up all the time, I think Shaker was cultural exchange program, where
Mm.
I discovered music that I wouldn't have listened to. I would have stayed
Right,
with Motown. I mean, we
right,
had show tunes and
right.
things like that at home, but I would never have heard of Judas Priest or
My first concert was a
Boston.
Judas Priest concert.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I
Yeah.
wasn't. I wasn't even a huge fan. I went with friends, but anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So thinking of you and Lawrence's relationship, did you ever talk about it while you were there or post college, or have you ever talked about why didn't we stick together, or why didn't we remain friends? What did your friend group look like, and did it look more Jewish and white when you got to junior high, and did his gravitate somewhere else, or because there were three distinct groups when we were in high school?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I used Lomond from Lee Road all the way up to Warrensville Center, and then when you cross uh, Warrensville Center or the rapid tracks, then it takes on a different complexion for sure. So that's how I see it. I mean,
Interesting. I mean, did Lawrence and I ever talk about it? No. I have fantasies of having that conversation with him sometimes. Um, I think we drifted apart. I mean, in some ways, Lawrence kind of started finding that he did well with more popular kids,
mhm.
in junior high school, and I don't know. I mean, people drift apart. I don't even know if I can say exactly what happened. But we stayed friendly. He would come over every now and then. Even in high school, I think we did like when we were juniors, like a history day project. But it was always a little awkward because there was always that pass where I fucking loved Lawrence. We were really
It
close.
seems like you were hurt.
Uh,
I
I
mean, it
was.
feels like there's
I
some
was
hurt.
hurt.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I was hurt. And I'm not saying he did anything wrong. I mean, maybe he
Mhm.
thought I drifted away, but yeah. So there's that. But I never did. I mean, I saw him at a reunion. Like, now this must have been 20 years ago. I think we were that 20th reunion would have been, yeah, when we were in
Yeah.
our late 30s. That was the only reunion I've been to so far. And he and I talked. I remember afterwards we were in the parking lot. We sort of just the two of us. Like my friends went this way, and we chatted. It was really nice. And I know his family, so I think Janice had just passed away, and his older sister, and we sort of talked about that. And but yeah, I think it's getting a little too close. It's just like touching fire.
Mm.
It just didn't. Well, it was him or me. I don't know. It just couldn't quite go there. But as far as who I ended up hanging with, I would say that my closest friends probably were Jewish, which was not by choice. It just happened. There's a lot of Jewish kids at Shaker anyway. But
Mhm.
I think, I look back at my life and all the people I've been friends with who are Jewish. It's like, oh, how did that happen? It wasn't intentional. Um, but so like David Brode, and he was a ping pong player too, by the way. David Brode, Steve Turoff, Paul
R.I.P.
Davis.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, David. I didn't. I just learned that.
You just learned that? Yeah.
Just learned it. Yeah,
Wow.
because of you, Gabe. I was watching when you did the bench. And you
Yeah.
were reading the names. I was shocked, but anyway. Yeah. So, but because of sports and things like cycle and the different, I was also buddies in junior high school with people like Derek Burgess and
Mhm.
Dave Jackson.
Yeah. R.I.P. Yeah.
Right. I know this is crazy
Yeah.
Yeah.
that all these people have passed away, but so like I went to Derek's house. He came to my house more than I went to his. Another thing about race, by the way, coming to the white kid's house, um but but yeah, I mean, and Dave Jackson too. Like if you look at my bar mitzvah pictures, there's You know, there's David Roden, Turoff, and Davis, and Paul Davis, and you know, Derek Burgess and Dave Jackson and um, Priscilla and Robin. You know, but it's so. And then in Shaker, I think but the closest people I was really really close to tended to be more white. Theater changed that a little bit. Theater was, you know, not really diverse, but it was mixed, and that's where I became friends with Scott. And but if you think about the numbers in Shaker, it is crazy how segregated we actually all were.
Yeah, and I think the class structures, you know, for the people that were in the level 5 or
Yep.
level 4 classes, they tended to hang around each other, and then you saw a conglomerate of racial mixing there. You know, there were the elite.
That's
How
right.
should I put it? At least how I
Yeah.
saw them as academic elite,
Yeah.
and then there was, you know, everyone else. You know, and it had to do with where they lived and
Yeah. It's all about class. And the thing is, you don't think that when you're a kid.
Yeah, you're not aware of it.
You think
Class
it's
and caste system.
totally, and you think that you have talent, and your parents make you think that, and your parents make you think that if you don't do those things, there's something wrong with you, and that those level 5 classes are going to lead to the good colleges, you know. And it's really problematic. You know, I see it now when my daughter's 12. I have one kid, and she's 12 and just starting junior high in 6th grade, and yeah, I mean, I see all the sort of, because this is where Brown is, right? Brown is in Providence, and you just see it. It's not even, people aren't even aware of it, you know. Just assumption about what have to go to a good school. Well, you ever stop and say, what is a good school exactly? What do you mean by that? Do you mean that? How do you measure that? Oh, well, they do. It's always academic, and it's always academic with the backdrop being eventually you'll feed into the Ivies or something like that. That's the best school. You know, that's the.
And don't tell anyone that you're going to Cuyahoga Community College to start off your school. That was like on the level of joining the military. That means you didn't know what
absolutely.
you were gonna do or what have you. And now it's like the smartest thing to do, money wise or what have you. Like figure out what you want to do and get on your own 2 feet so that you have some idea. So many people went to college not knowing what the hell they wanted to do.
Eric, you're 100%. And like, you know, as a professor, I can tell you there were 2 classes of students that always were my favorite, and not just favorite, but did the best academically. One were veterans, and the other were kids who took at least a couple of years off, either in the middle or before they started. And so it's to the point where they knew why. I mean, it's obvious why, right? I mean, there was discipline with the military students, but also like just, I'm coming to school for a reason. I don't have time to waste time, you know?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there is this kind of like luxury of sorts, whether it's explicit, but it's there about the, you know, going to college. You know, college should be, it's not a right, it's a privilege, you know.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain level of that that we see, and I think, you know, the system plays into that. I mean, think about all the celebration of partying and alcoholism and everything else. Oh, college, get drunk and get fucked up, and
that's right.
you know, and if it, you know, if there's no guardrails in place, you know, shit goes awry, as we see all the time.
That's right.
You know, especially with mental health and, you know, and all the things. You know, first it was, you know, for us it was like the credit cards coming up. You know, coming up in college, you know, you got your first credit card, and
everybody gets taken. You buy the first
right. Yeah,
right.
You know, and now, you know, the other creep up is gambling. You know, all the gambling apps. You know.
Oh yeah, right. Interesting.
Especially during March Madness and this, you know, the football thing. So it's as a, you know, side note to all that. But you're right about the veterans and people who take a year off, man. You know, I always joke around, if I ever became dictator of the United States,
get in line.
I'd be a good I'd be a good dictator. But I would have mandatory service.
Yeah.
You know, not just military, but things related to conservation, infrastructure. There would be tracks, obviously, because everybody should have a sense of what it's like to serve beyond themselves.
That's good.
Service above self.
That's good.
Because
I really like it. I was just as a side note. I don't know if this has to do with what you're saying, but I was helping a friend move boxes into a storage facility today, and we had those dollies that are the flatbed kind, you know, the big metal ones are so awkward, and we lined them up and we left, and this guy says, "Hey," he says, "you guys in the military? You guys serve?" What? We had no idea what he's talking about. He goes, you lined those up so perfectly. I figured you had to be military.
Right. Yeah. You know, I mean, that's a little thing right there. You know, you think about for all of us coming through the community we came through, like certain things that were just, you were expected to do that were normal, simple things like that. Or put the shopping cart back in the thing, you know, at the grocery store instead of, I'm gonna just leave it by my car or whatever, you know. But yeah, those little subtle things, man, you know, devil in the details.
Those go a long way. When Gabe and I decided to do this podcast, we were always having conversations about our shaker experience, and then in reading the book, Laura Meckler's Dream City, Dreamtown.
Did you read that?
Yep. I haven't. I didn't read all of it. I did. It's not because it's not a great book. I just I haven't finished. I have to be honest. I didn't finish it, but I did.
Yeah, that's real.
Great book. I actually went to the signing at the bookstore that she did. It was the last summer, I think. Does that sound right?
Yeah, like 2023. Yeah.
Because you know who's good. You know the people, that woman I said who worked with my mom as a reporter is Carolyn Milter, and Carolyn Milter was featured. So she was part of the family in Ludlow that did the whole Ludlow.
They were my neighbors. Yes.
All right. That's right. She came up when I said that I was talking to you. She got really excited. So Bert Milter, who right, he just passed away this year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I saw him a couple years ago at the Cleveland Film Festival. Yeah,
he loved film. But they were. I called them Uncle Bert and Aunt Carolyn because Carolyn was my mom's best friend. Bert was my dad's best friend, and they introduced my parents. But what was wonderful about moving to Wisconsin is that Cleveland was halfway to my family here.
Yeah.
I'd stop in Cleveland every time, and I'd stay with them at Moreland Court. Beautiful apartment.
Yeah.
And we would talk. And she became this. I did oral histories with them for my Schaumburg exhibit.
Great, man. Yeah.
But Laura Meckler reached out to me because Carolyn said that I had shaker stuff. And so I didn't end up having anything she really needed. But she did interview Carolyn Milter a lot. Carolyn, if you look in the index, there's a lot of pages.
I got to say this about the Milters. I miss Nancy, Richie, and Joanna. I think Joanna's in New York. Richie's in Cleveland. Nancy's in Cleveland. She's like Howard Hughes, you know. Nobody knows where she is. But the Milters were 2 doors. There were 3 doors down from me, and me and Richie ran the streets.
Okay.
Got in a lot of trouble. Yeah, got in a lot of trouble. But artistically and culturally, that's where I got aware of like theater, because they would have the playbills. I got aware of the New York Times.
Yeah.
Got aware of like National Geographic.
Oh, interesting.
New York Magazine.
Yeah.
Which fed my curiosity because they were.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah, they were so, they were so cosmopolitan. You know.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. She's from West Virginia, and she came up to work at the Cleveland Press in the 50s, like my mom. He's my dad and Bert were buddies when they were 12. They met in junior high school.
Wow. McDonald and Company. That's where Mr. Milter worked.
Yeah, he was a stockbroker, and he collected cars.
Yeah. And he smoked the pipe.
Yep. And drove his Mercedes, and then he shifted over to Jaguars.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's funny you say that about the cultural stuff, because if I think about my first time in listening to NPR, it was in his car.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's a great show. It was
Yeah, shout out to the Milters.
As I'm thinking as you're talking, I was trying to get to the point where we noticed and recognized, and a lot of the book couldn't cover because it was from her perspective. There's 2 Shakers. Most of the Black people that came to Shaker entered like in the same area, and they were brought to get into a better school system. Even teachers that taught in the Cleveland school system knew that they had to get their kids out of that school system into Shaker so that they would have a chance. But I was reminding Rob Ware. I used to talk to Rob Ware all the time, and I didn't know where Rob was in the summer because he was always in Michigan. or a lot of kids traveled during the summer, which
Yeah,
most
we
of the
did.
black kids did it.
I know. There's class right there. That's big
So
class.
we were in camps, sports camp. I went to YMCA camp, until I was 12 at the end of the summer, so my mom could get away, get a rest.
Yeah,
But
sure.
we were most of the black kids I know. Their parents were politically active. My mom was really strong with. She helped with Carl Stokes,
Oh, neat.
and she did a lot of volunteering. And we went to Karamu House all the time.
Nice.
Went to a lot of black productions, and always was exposed to theater, which now I wish I had gotten more into it. Looking back of what I used to think, theater geeks and the AV
Yep.
crew, those were
Yep.
the
Theater
less desirables.
Yeah, like if you want to climb the social ladder, you don't turn into the theater room. That's not the first choice, probably.
Well, I think Scott Ferguson would dispute that, because I remember he had a Facebook post, and it was sort of like an origin post of how he got into his current profession. It all started doing the lights for the synchronized swim
Oh,
team
yeah.
at Woodbury, and so that was his. So you talk about social climbing and meeting, and it's the same thing at Shaker with dudes joining the dance club,
Yeah,
to
that's
meet the
true.
girls,
Yeah, I knew what that
Yeah.
was about. Yeah,
yeah.
Jimmy
So,
Capoletti. Do you remember Jimmy Capoletti?
yes.
Oh, he
Yeah,
was on our
yeah,
show. Yeah, he was on our
yeah,
show.
Oh, was he? Oh,
yeah,
that's cool. He was a
yeah,
dancer, man. He could dance. White
yeah.
kid that could dance, right? But yeah. I mean, listen, Shaker had an incredible program and the theater program now, and that was a huge part of my life. That's I said there were three strands. I mean, this would be the second strand for what I do now, which is the creative, the artistic stuff, which came in different forms, but
Right.
theater became a big part of that. Like my dad passed away when I was in ninth grade, and that was a really
Sorry.
tough year. And
Yeah.
it was also the year that, well, eighth grade was the year that my sister had her accident, so it was just like intense in my house.
Mm.
And when I got into theater in 10th grade, my brother had done it. He had started it, so he was a senior, and then I was a sophomore. It really changed my life, And I'm going to say were problems with that program that stuff that came out later, but like the theater as an arts program, it was incredible for those who were in it. And I know that there was like this whole cliquey, culty thing, and some of that's probably fair, because this was a cult of personality around this guy Thornton, but what he was having us do was very different from the average high school. I'll just put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
and it definitely influenced the way I thought about not just theater and performing, but like literature,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Storytelling and my body and and dialogue, just interacting with other people. And so I took that artistic sensibility. I knew that that's worked for me, and so I took that to college, and I did a ton of theater in college. I ended up being a literature major.
Where'd you go to school?
Wesleyan in Connecticut.
Okay.
And they had, what was amazing about Wesleyan is that there was all this outside the theater department was all this sort of grassroots theater that students would put on, write and direct and act themselves. And they had like 5 different theaters where you could do this. So every weekend there would be at least 3 or 4 shows on. And so I did a ton of stuff, and I thought I was going to become a writer and write plays and novels, and that was kind of what I wanted to do. But I think the I didn't want now here, and so here's the third strand, which is I think a Shaker strand, to be honest, and maybe my dad a little bit too, which is this we were talking about earlier about this sort of pressure or almost this assumption that intellect and academic achievement was going to be part of your sort of Shaker identity.
Mhm.
And I was in those level 5 classes and stuff, and I just even though I was, I think, an artist at heart, there was something I couldn't shake about, I think, wanting to prove myself academically.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, sure.
I don't think it's a good thing, actually, but it, I mean, it's led to interesting stuff in my life, but it's, I think it is a little oppressive for everybody. For those who don't do it, but even for those who do, and
I think it becomes a class thing, and it's also played itself out in this year's election of how we see each other. It
yeah,
divides us.
I agree.
And I just read the tipping point, or the return of the tipping point.
Oh, it's a new Malcolm Gladwell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that, and it reminds me of our perspective and how we saw ourselves, especially as a Black person going to Shaker. We thought, we're a little uppity. Felt a little better about ourselves, and we're able to look down at some people because of our
In
experience
Cleveland
and
or
what we could
whatever,
say. Yeah,
or
you're
Warrensville
even
Heights.
Cleveland Heights or Shaw or the
Yeah,
neighboring communities.
That's why they hated us.
Yeah, so I think that lesson wasn't a good lesson, and I have to check myself, and remind myself because seeing where things are going, which I'm sure we'll get into as the conversation moves forward as you go after your college years. But
I agree. I think it's well said. And yeah, we have to check ourselves for lots of reasons. And so humility is always, always the goal. I mean, it's interesting ironically about theater is, despite the fact that you're like on stage, like like you think about high school theater, what's gross about it is all these kids going, look at me, and trying to get, you go to a party, it's like, God, get me out of this. I get it, and I'm not pretending like I wasn't a theater person,
Right.
but I think the thing about this guy James Thornton was he was so into the idea of ensemble. This is like the one thing he carried through, that he was actually would give those examples of the high school who, like, each kid's putting their elbow in front of the next kid so they can be the front of the poster, and telling us to go the opposite direction. It's about giving to the other person. It's about being part of an ensemble, not starring or standing out. And I think I took some of that to heart, and like some of that comes from parts of the Jewish tradition, which I am attracted to, parts of my mom. Like, I think that humility is really important too. I'm not saying I've mastered it, but it's a good goal to aspire to. But if you take, those are the three strands, to go back to this question you asked me a half hour ago or whatever, but like, it's, my experience with race in high school, with sort of the arts, and then with this intellect thing, led me to, I think it all came together in my senior year of college when I took a political theater course. It was we were reading plays, but it was the history of political theater, like using theater as protest. And it turned me on. I was like, okay, here's theater for social purpose. Here's the historical context of theater to understand, where a play comes from and understand the history behind it, and vice versa, to understand history through the play. Just those two things talking to each other really turned me on. And so there was an intellectual stimulation that I got into, but it had this artistic component. And I don't even know what that would have meant professionally, but there was something about that I was really drawn to, wanting to get into like stories and this kind of thing. And after college, my brother and I, the first big thing I did was my brother and I did this whole program on storytelling. We invented a project for junior high school kids, and we rode our bicycles across the country from Maine to San Francisco. It took an entire school year to do it. We were in 33 different schools. We stayed at one school a week and then biked on the weekends. We went up and down. We did like almost 5,000 miles because we went Maine down, back up to Ohio. And we just, is a crazy route. And that changed my life. I mean, it was like, I realized that, we use stories. The whole purpose is to get kids interested in writing and reading. So we were bringing stories from the regions we went through. We studied folklore. My theater experience led to storytelling. I got really into this idea of storytelling, like taking an entire stage without a set, without costumes, Mark Twain style, right, Eric? Like, and just bringing something to life by just telling a good story.
What was the impetus for this, and what does your brother do that brought you together to do this?
So my brother went to Georgetown. He wanted to be a diplomat. He was in the School of Foreign Service, and it didn't work out. He decide he didn't like it. It was lots of things that he got disillusioned by. And while he was still young, he was 23 or 24, he was working for Riff. Remember Reading is Fundamental?
Yeah.
Woodsy Owl.
And
Yeah.
And who was on the board of Riff but Barbara Bush? This because she was the big reading lady,
Yeah.
the first lady. And Seth was working in the office. Seth is a huge biker. He's done, triathlons and stuff like that. He had biked solo from Alaska back to Cleveland. Like he's intense, right? So I couldn't keep up with him. And he had this idea. He wanted to get out of Riff, and he had an idea that he was going to what if we biked across the country and get kids interested in reading? And we'll do it for Riff. Riff will sponsor us, and we'll do like motivational talks. Like I climbed the mountain, and you can read this book. And so he said, join me, James. And I was living in DC. I moved where he was because I had a girlfriend who went to American University at the time, went sort of was big first love kind of thing. And then we broke up. And so I had said no to Seth, and then it turned into a yes. And we've planned this thing. And what I brought was the acting storytelling thing. I said, let's do this by like bringing these stories to life. And so we created a whole week-long program, and we collected stories across the country. And yeah, it was amazing. But in the process, I got really interested in local history, and how there's regional history, and I collected stories by interviewing people. So that was my first oral history experience. I was interviewing
Alan
kids.
Lomax style.
Yes, and I didn't even know who Alan Lomax was at the time, but that was the thing that was really catching fire for me. And so when I finished, I knew I didn't want to just write grants, and I had to do more. And I felt, and here's the shaker part, I felt like I couldn't just stop with a BA. There's no reason I could, right? That's just bullshit. But that was what I was thinking to myself. I want to go to grad school. So I went out in search of a grad program, and I ended up, a friend of mine was in a history program, and he described it in ways that seemed really open, and I could do all kinds of different things. And that led to this academic career. And once you dive into that, man, it's hard to get out. But I'm out of it now. I left 2 years ago, but like that's a whole career, right?
Yeah. No, I feel you on that. Like, I think about like my own drive. You talk about that shaker. I think there was a certain level over compensation. I feel I come clean on. Like, I went back to school, got 3 master's degrees. And,
Right.
all this other stuff. But that stemmed from shaker. I think there was a certain part of me that was like, I need to make up for all the fucking around I did and just being there. Like, let motherfuckers know.
Yep. Right.
So,
and that's not, that's not bad, right? You're not doing drugs. You're going to getting a master's degrees, but it's, it's good to, like you were saying there, to check some of that, to sort of, okay, where's this all coming from?
Yeah. Because I used to judge people, how they spoke, like, why can't you say this and that? My dad, that's stuff I got from my parents, because the assimilation process was very, very important to be able to go out and get a job and speak like other white people. Yeah, enunciate.
Yep.
And then, and one of the most, how should I say it? What we hate to hear as Black people, oh, he's very articulate.
Yeah. He's so well spoken.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the word conversate. People for the longest time, that's not a real word. Yes, it is. Conversate. It is a real word.
And then,
if it's used, it's a word,
Yeah.
Who gets to decide what's a real word and what's not a real word?
Exactly. Like fleek, on blast. That's what I love about lingo, slang. That cultures create. Because they are real words. So.
Well, that's the thing you find out later. I mean, when you start to see the world embracing your culture and how your culture moves the needle and moves the language and creates all of this, and becoming aware of that. I mean, when I really started becoming really aware of hip hop being the next original American art form, as in jazz, and listening to the poetic nature of it, and then it just changed my whole view of everything. Then I started seeing the world, as a whole in its totality, and then seeing me and my place in the world, and then seeing everything wrong with it. So,
how old were you when that transformation happened, Eric?
Well, gangster rap scared the shit out of me, And I was like, oh shit, you know. And then when it became, I'll call it suburban rap, De La Soul, you know,
Yeah.
those groups that I could really relate to. That's when I became, you know, I started to listen more
Got
because,
it. Yeah.
you know, from what I was taught in my assimilation process, you
Yeah.
know, gangster rap kind of went against that. And
Yeah.
now I understand it better, you know, but, you know, music drives the culture. Music tells you
No
what is
question.
going on, you know, and Questlove, who's my favorite of the Roots, the
I'm
drummer.
mixed about gangster rap because when I think about when I first heard NWA,
Hmm.
um, Easy E. I mean, it was just the audacity of what they
Yeah.
were saying on record in opposition to Public Enemy,
Yes.
and then, but even before then, there was, for me at least, there was Schoolie D out of Philly, and to me, he is like the original gangster rapper talking about Philly murder, drugs,
Yeah.
Parkside 5-2 and stuff. And to me, that was like listen to like an audio version of Marvel Comics,
Oh, that's cool. I like that's a good yeah.
And then,
Yep.
when I got to New York and then had the opportunity to be really into the culture more so, then it became all these nuances. And then, to Eric's point, like, yeah, the De La's, the Beastie
Diggable.
Boys, yeah, and Diggables were, especially Beasties and De La, were like, oh, these are the type of cats that I would have known of back in Shaker.
Right.
They were Shaker adjacent.
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
look at like, the Beastie Boys like Ad Rock and Mike D and be like, yeah, I know guys like you back home. Like I had reference points.
And their
Same thing with De La.
influences were big, you know,
Yeah,
vast.
yeah, yeah. And
I
same
mean,
thing
I
with
like
PE,
that. I like the superhero reference, the comic book reference. Like if you think about it, and this happens with any rap actually that gets like brutal, whether it's killing cops or whatever, or even Eminem, the whole thing when he was what was that one rap he did where he put his girlfriend in the back in the trunk and
Yeah.
all that, right?
His
Like if you
mom
think
and
about it,
everybody.
if you take it out of the context of rap and think about it as like horror genre, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like how many, or even just in old folk music, how many murder ballads are there? In like Irish music,
Yeah.
and so these guys are
Johnny
putting on
Cash.
characters, they're putting on personas,
Yeah.
Hmm.
and that says something about race and racism, I think.
Oh
And
yeah.
Eminem's his own thing, but when you say, well, that black rapper is saying this stuff, and that's who he is, and I'm terrified as a white person, and we got to put him down, and we got
It's the
to outlaw
drums.
this.
They heard
Well,
the
there
drums.
people have been convicted for their songs,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know, just
No.
recently, which is like, oh my God, you know, but I was always told by my parents, and I'm sure Gabe's parents said, just
No, they didn't
because,
say nothing to me, bro.
no,
My
not
parents were
about,
non-existent.
oh, okay. Well,
They
my
were.
parents, well, the people around me, you know, black people in general in the suburbs, just because that white kid can do it doesn't mean that you can do it
yeah,
because your ass will be in jail or what have you. You can't
yeah,
hang out with kids on the corner drinking beer and shit, running on golf courses because they will
yep,
catch your punishment will be totally different,
yeah.
and your path and everything going forward could be ruined. And
The talk, you got the talk.
yeah, they'll be able to recover. They've got people in high places, you know.
I
And
think.
it's true. I
I
mean,
think when I look back, to that moment, you know, my parents were sort of hands off in a way, but there were still some guardrails. There was still an awareness. Like I will say, like my dad, he had friends. He had poker buddies that lived in Cleveland and stuff, and who had kids. But he always said to me, "I don't. I want you to know, just because you live in Shaker, you're not better than them." So he was very acutely aware of that fine line. And also, with for me and my family, and some of the stuff we had to deal with was the fact that we were an Air Force military family. We had lived overseas. We came back to Shaker. So there was this like thing, I think, about where do you fit in, because a lot of times, when my dad was stationed over in England and Japan, they were like the Jackie Robinson families. They were the only black family still dealing with good old American racism,
Yep.
a couple thousand miles away. So there was a lot of, you know, I would say having to learn how to code switch at a very early age, my siblings, and just kind of like really no coddling. So me being the last one by mistake, wound up in Shaker. They were kind of just like kind of hands off, but those things that Eric speaks about and stuff, those things came to me. They came to me living in the Ludlow area. Certainly, incidents and reminders and other things that would make you scratch your head. I'll give you a case in point. I think about it today. So at an early age, yeah, I was fantasizing to be about wanting to join the army, be an army man. So I'd go around the neighborhood. I had my face painted up, had camo gear on, had a BB gun, and I'd be roaming around the neighborhood as if I was on some patrol off the TV show Combat. Somebody called the cops.
Oh man!
And Shaker cop rolled up. He saw me in the ivy bushes in front of the Milter's house with my BB gun.
Uh-oh.
He stops and's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm just playing Army." He was like, "Okay, all right." Somebody called. They didn't know, and he drove off. Now you talk about that's a fucking anomaly right there.
Yeah, it is. It's not Tamir Rice.
Yeah. So these weird things that, anomalies. That's what I call.
There's so many perceptions when you go back to your childhood and you realize, or even my early working career, you realize what those things were because we were naive back then. And just see how society sees black kids. Black kids are really cute when they're babies or until the age of 6, and then all of a sudden they're grown-ups. They're adults. They're looked upon as
man
for some reason. Yeah. So we have not got to why you chose African American studies. How did you get to that?
Well, we sort of did. I mean, I don't think I did a great job, but I was saying that. I was just saying that. So, okay. I mean, I got us up to where I went to get a PhD in history. So I applied to these programs. I got into a program at Rutgers in New Jersey, and I knew I wanted to study cultural history. I still was into the arts. I was going to figure out a way to like get the knowledge, the expertise with the arts, and somehow it was all going to work out. 2 years later, it's not how it works, And it's history also. History PhDs, the average time to do a PhD in history is 8 years, I think. 8 years.
Yeah. You could have it.
Including, writing the dissertation. I mean, it's crazy. It's just,
It's a racket,
and I don't know. But I was looking at what to do, and I just found myself, drawn to African American history. And I think it was a combination of what I was saying before about, comparing myself to other people. Be a really interesting thing to talk to a lot of the white kids in Shaker and what about Black culture or tradition or history they're drawn to and why, and how many of us have committed our lives, at least in some ways, to that. I think it is. I mean, look, in the 60s, when all these books were being written about slavery, 80% of them were written by Jewish guys. So it's not like it's a new thing. And there's even a colonial aspect to that, right? Where you're kind of like white people taking knowledge and saying we're going to write the history of Black America. It's problematic. Like I'm well aware of that, but I was interested in it, and I knew that one thing I had known, partly from my background, partly from reading history and going through classes, was going back to what Eric was saying. It's American culture cannot be understood without Black culture at its center, and it's in every way, good and bad. And the contributions to culture, and of course, experience of slavery and the whole thing, and I guess I wanted to dive in. I was like, why, I don't want, if I'm scared of it, that's like my mom used to call it counterphobia. I think it's a Freudian term or something. There are people who have fears and they run away from them. There's people who have fears and they run toward them. Yeah. And I have a little bit of that in me, I think.
What's your
So
zodiac sign?
I'm a Gemini.
Okay.
I don't know if that lines up with that at all, but
Are you what? Late May, June?
I'm June 1st.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Air sign. Yeah.
okay. So anyway, I was just interested, and I knew that there was some like you shouldn't do this, or you're not allowed to do this, or you can't do this, and I'm like, well, why not? And so started doing it. But I asked the people I studied with, who were black scholars mostly, like, is this something I shouldn't do? Like, it was one thing to study, another thing then to put yourself in the job market as an expert in Black history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got nobody talked me out of it. Nobody dissuaded me from it. There were two different kinds of answers. One from my advisor, is a pretty famous historian named David Levering Lewis. He's the big Du Bois scholar. He wrote
Mm-hmm.
like 1,500 pages, 2 volumes about Du Bois. But he was like, scholarship should be colorblind. And I don't want this to be, I don't want this to be about your race. And then another guy on my committee said, well, the thing is, we need people to teach African American history, and there's actually not enough people out there with degrees right now. And there's a lot of places like where I got jobs, right, where better to have a white guy than nobody. And he also said, I don't want to live in a world where I'm black and I teach history and it's expected that I do black history, and you're white and you're not allowed to. I want to live in a world where, and this is maybe the colorblind thing related, he said, I want a world where I can be an expert in military history or in the history of science and I'm black, and then you can be an expert in African American history. And of course, that's the easy place to go with this stuff, which is, I mean, if I can't teach black history, then I shouldn't teach history of the 1920s either, because I didn't live that, and I shouldn't teach women in my, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think it's a little too easy, though, and I have appreciated like I said, the question mark, and I have had people challenge me. I've been told I haven't gotten jobs because I'm white. I've been up for a few jobs in places where they're not supposed to, but they came out and told me, and I knew that that's what I was getting into. And that's not a bad thing. There's a lot more black scholars who haven't gotten jobs because of racism than people like me who haven't gotten jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job, eventually. But like, I've had students. Some of my favorite students have challenged me and said, well, why are you doing this? I had a woman who was a Black Panther and had been an activist in Long Island and sort of integrating her school and getting them to hire Black teachers and also teach African-American history in the school. This was in the 60s. And so now she's an older woman, former Black Panther. She comes to teach, to visit my class. I invited her. And in the middle of all my students, we were talking about what she did. We were talking about the history. And then at the end, she said, so I'm just curious, how'd you get this job? And I said, well, what do you mean? She says, well, I'm just wondering, what are your credentials? And I told her I have a PhD and all this. She goes, yeah, well, do you know the people who didn't get the job when you were offered the job? And I don't know. I'm not allowed to know who didn't get the job. But she was taking me to task in front of the students. And clearly, and she started like name dropping like reverends in Chicago and people that aren't part of the mainstream canon, but people that she assumed that if you're black, you would know. If you're white, you wouldn't know. It was really interesting. And like for me, like one of my students sort of raised her hand and started defending me. I loved it because it was a good conversation and she wasn't shutting me down. We just had it. And afterwards she was like, this was great. Let's get together for lunch sometime. It was like, that's the way it goes. And I think that's important, to sort of change up our comfort zone, push our comfort zone a little bit.
Does acknowledge the elephants in the room. I think it also goes back to what you're saying. It's also about who is framing that conversation at the end of the day. Who is framing that conversation? Two authors came to mind. William Katz, who did the whole Black West series. I mean, it's like, for what it is at the moment, the most definitive series on Black Western life.
That's
so
right. I got it on my bookshelf.
Yeah. I called him up one time in New York, and he was like, "Who is this?" Because I wanted to ask him about some things. This is when we had phone books, but I mean, this was, but again, who frames the conversation? And think about Robert Ferris Thompson, Flash of the Spirit. I mean, that dude is so well versed in in the African diasporic culture and dance, and like, so for anybody to be like, oh, how come he gets to teach it? And that's like, come on. I mean, these are people who've dedicated their life to these things, to addressing elephants in the room,
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
use the
but
metaphor.
I agree, Gabe, and but I would say that I don't 100% agree with my advisor who said it just should be colorblind. I think it's a little too easy, but I do agree that people
Yeah.
like me have the can, and maybe some cases should do it, but we should be very aware and always challenging and checking ourselves.
And that's where, let me just finish for a second.
Yeah,
This
go
is
ahead.
where it comes out, I think comes down to a structural thing of the structures that we are all having to operate in,
Yeah,
And so that structural realignment has to happen at the same time as we have these conversations, It's the same thing about the fire department, oh, the last bastion of white malehood,
right.
and certainly, academia,
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah, academia. The numbers are not good.
anyway.
Do you get a sickening feeling when you're addressed in that way, and when you have to address people that come at you? And because I know it hasn't been good, especially since the pandemic, when all these things started to come to surface, and the division was far and wide, and I became hyper educated and hyper aware of who I am and what brought us to that point. And it seems to be the plane is at a nosedive, societal wise, of where I thought we were headed. Looking, in my Shaker years or my Montessori years, and how things were advancing, and just division within, just looking at the academic now, people that see things from, an academic perspective. I don't know what to believe anymore, about anything, about our history and what we're taught.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a dividing line between all of us, amongst all of us. I've never seen anything like it's a cold civil war that's going on. I mean, how is that affecting you and what you do and how you feel and your experiences moving forward?
Well, I mean, I'll say two things about it. Number one is that I kind of wish that I got pushed more, and I think people, and this is human nature, pass judgment quietly. It's risky to do what that woman did. It's risky to challenge me, and those are my favorite people, So I wish I got challenged more. And I taught in most of my academic career. It was 12 years at UW Whitewater, and that's a rural. I lived in Madison, but Whitewater's a rural campus, and they're Black students, but it's it's like 90%, 88% white or something. So even if I taught an intro to African American history, that might take a 30 student class that normally would be 27 white kids, or 25 white kids, 2 Latino kids, 3 Black kids. And the numbers would go up to like 7 Black kids or 8 Black kids, right, out of 30. So it was very safe for me, and I didn't like that. But as far as the George Floyd moment and the turn during the pandemic, I mean, what's funny is that going back to my storytelling stuff, right, and the creative part, is that I like teaching, I like writing a lot. I miss being an artist. I miss doing creative stuff. And so my whole goal for my entire academic career was to do things that were more creative, out of the box, and ultimately also community based. So academia is so removed, and the closest thing in terms of my politics and ethics is to direct work with students, which I loved. But I started doing stuff out in community. And that means, for a historian, it's called public history. It means doing things like finding a community group, working with them to do an oral history project about their neighborhood or about a particular topic. This thing called community archiving, where people bring in their photographs and grandparents' letters, and they figure out how the community can create an archive out of it and not give it to a university or a formal archive, and that kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of power in that, to empower people to organize and to cross cultural and racial lines. So I did a lot of that at Whitewater, and it led me out in a really good way. And this was just when the pandemic was happening. That was a good for me. In some ways, I'm part of the great resignation they talk about, because the job I had, it was, the community work I was doing was not being recognized, and that started, by the way, with the Black Suburbia exhibit I did that Gabe was part of. That's a public history, doing a museum, doing an exhibit. And that was all based on oral history, among other things. So I loved it. I found that's where it's at for me. I love doing that work in the communities and organizing and bringing people from different backgrounds together through story and through dialogue. So when George Floyd happened, I was like plotting my escape, basically, and I got this national fellowship to do this work I've been doing, and I used it as an opportunity to jump. And so it worked out partly too because I was just old enough to do an early retirement. So,
Nice.
So, and I had not been there long enough to have any kind of real pension, but I was able to, there was some sick leave and stuff like that I could do. And so I started my own nonprofit, and that's what I do now. Yeah. That's what I'm doing now.
So tell us about whose
land
is. Yeah. Whose land?
Yeah. So it's what the holding company, the nonprofit's name is the Race and Place Coalition. Okay. Now that's significant because it embraces the Black Suburbia Project. It embraces a diverse suburbs project I did in Long Island. When I was still a professor, I started this thing called the Wisconsin Farms Oral History Project, which was looking at the entire state of Wisconsin and farming through the lens of race. So I was looking at Black farmers in rural and especially urban areas like Milwaukee. It was looking at, German, Swedish, Finnish, all the white ethnicities. It was looking at Hmong farmers, at Native, Indian farmers, etc. And so this culminated in an exhibit we did about race and farming in Wisconsin. And we're writing a book about the exhibit right now. And in the process of doing that, I built all these amazing partnerships in Wisconsin. I got students and different universities in the UW system to collaborate with me. And I made some really great friends and great contacts. And it was the basis for what I'm doing now. And what I shifted to, kind of carrying on that work for race and farming, was looking at land more directly, and specifically looking at the issue of land displacement and dispossession.
Yeah.
Because in the farm project, the premise was, everybody has a connection to farming somewhere in their ancestry. And if they don't, at least they have a connection to food, right? Or land. And so the idea being that we would find common grounds. So there's a little bit of a kumbaya side to this, like, hey, we can use the farmers in Milwaukee whose ancestors came up from the South and brought their farming with them, and who were doing urban gardens, and bring them together with like a white family of German heritage that ran a dairy farm. And that's actually worked. We brought these different people together. But I realized what was really missing was power. And power, you could have common backgrounds. It doesn't mean you're on equal footing. And
very true.
Power was a lot to do with, that's why I liked your opening question, Gabe, like, where did your parents come from? How'd you get to Shaker? You can understand power in America really through the lens of who's, where, and why. How did they get there? When they got there, who got displaced? Where did they go? What was that? What were the mechanisms for that displacement? And so I really believe you can understand all of American history through that lens of land and movement, displacement, settlement versus displacement.
I agree. I read something recently about Tyler Sheridan. He's a prolific TV producer, 1883, Yellowstone, Lioness, but
Cool.
he's based out of Texas, and he has like a several 100,000-acre ranch.
Wow.
That was in some other family's previous ownership for generations.
Wow.
And he bought it. He's leveraged it to use for his productions and stuff like that. But to your point, it got me thinking about, the generations of who had that land and how was it passed down. what did the original deed look like? I mean,
Yep.
was it in an
Yep. Exactly.
indigenous American,
Yep.
indigenous Native Americans that had that land, the whole nine? Like, okay, how did you come across this land?
There you
And
go. Isn't that
yeah,
interesting? So I
yeah,
love those questions.
yeah,
And I found that by looking at the layers of history on any piece of land, it almost by definition brings in people from all kinds of different cultures. So
yeah,
we can go back to that. Oh, like for example, okay, Milwaukee, right? Milwaukee's story of
yes,
Milwaukee is the same as so many cities across the country, which
yes,
is that in the 50s and 60s, as highways were being built and people were into urban renewal, Black communities got raised, and then people were displaced and maybe given a voucher to go find a house somewhere else. And so this isn't just people losing their homes, but this is also like entire communities. I mean, Tulsa
yeah,
is one version of that, which is really, really violent. But that kind of thing, and it didn't just happen once in the 50s, right?
yeah,
This is the Black
yeah,
experience. I don't have to tell you guys this, right? But over and over and over again, displacement, resettling, moving at lightning speed, the way that white people had decades, Black people might have 15 years to get their community together. And there it is, barbershops and churches and businesses, and then only to be broken up again. And so in Milwaukee, this happened in what was called Walnut Street in the
mhm.
50s and 60s. People then, the Black community sort of moves north and west to various, and the still north side of Milwaukee is still very,
Like a
very Black.
box. It's like a
Yeah, kind of.
box.
Yeah, although
Yeah,
it's sort of spread, but yeah, because
yeah,
the community also grew in size. But and Walnut Street, and the sad thing about that is that the highway was not even built in that area. They just raised all the buildings and expanded
mhm,
this with the width of the street. But so it's very recent. There's plenty of people that are alive and have memories from Walnut Street. But then, so the one neighborhood I'm really tight with is a place called Metcalf Park. Now, Metcalf Park, to what you just said, Gabe, and this is key to understanding what I'm doing now. My students, we did this research on Metcalf Park. There's a railroad that goes right through it. In
mhm.
1890, it was a huge amount of farmland there. Four guys come, buy the farmland in that area, and they develop it. When they bought it, they already had the blocks sort of gridded out. A stove company from Troy, New York decides to have a Midwestern factory in Milwaukee, and they plot themselves there right along the railroad. And the housing is built over the next 20 years all around it. The workers, to house the workers. Workers were mostly German immigrants, some Irish, some Jewish, white families. If you trace those houses, people starting in the teens were living there. By the 1950s and 60s, they start moving out. It's aging out. A lot of it's white
Mhm.
flight. What happens though, and this is a story in Cleveland, it's everywhere, right? What happens is commercial properties jump in, buy these
Right.
things. So people become tenants. They're neglectful landlords. People who are moving in don't have the same resources, don't have the same jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And you see what I was describing with my grandparents and my dad's house.
Right.
That was a Jewish neighborhood that became Black. Same thing happened because of racism, segregation, et cetera, et cetera. These places get boarded up, houses get ripped down, and then you have a brownfield toxic
Right.
dump. And they literally will, I was told by one of my partners that the bulldozers come in and they bulldoze the house into the foundation and then cover it up. So think about all the crap. These
Yeah.
now have become green fields for people to have gardens, but they can't plant in the soil. They have to have raised beds. But there's this whole cycle, right, where you have farmland, factory, white immigrants, Black community, and then some of these places get destroyed.
Yeah.
Black middle class and people who are more well up move out, and you have hyper segregation, hyper poverty. What we're doing with Whose Land is not only telling that whole story of all those layers, but trying to put, say, the German family, right there, who was there, bought the house in 1918, and their grandchildren were the last to live there in the 50s. To find the grandchildren or the great grandchildren, their children, in that house or on that space that's now, say, a community garden or still a standing house, and
Right.
find the Black families
Right.
living there and bring them together. This is that's the basis for me to try to bring people together, to have conversations using the history of land.
No, that's really dope. I mean, and there's so many places that you can do that program, across the country.
Yep.
It's just like, wow. Um,
Well, I'll tell you this, just a little plug, if I could. We have,
yeah.
to your point, I mean, my website is whoseland.org. It's pretty simple. Whose Land, one word.
Okay.
And we have this, we're just launched actually in the last couple of weeks. We just announced that we're going to do this big project for the 250th, the semi-quincentennial.
Oh yeah.
Back in this
Yeah.
at all? We remember the bicentennial, right?
Mhm.
Did I spell that right? Whosland.org.
No, you didn't. You left an E out.
Out.
Oh, okay. See, that's my
Um,
shaker education. There you go.
I think you were just typing too fast.
Yeah. Put it up.
So 2026 is going to be the 250th anniversary. And what we want to do is, we know there's going to be, especially under Trump, I think there's going to be this founding fathers patriotic crap, right?
I've been tracking that actually.
Oh, have
Yeah.
you? So
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is an alternative version.
Yeah.
Right now, we're coming up with that's it. We're coming up with a title still. It's a working title. We're calling it The People's 250th. And the idea is to have it be grassroots stories based on place and land, rural, urban, Native American, whatever it might be, all across the country. And we're building a big platform where people can add stories. I won't say more because it's complicated, but if you go to our website and look up 250, you can see there's a page on it.
Well, without going without saying, we'll talk more about it offline. I'm down.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
right.
I'm curious now, Gabe.
Yeah,
Let's definitely do that. Let's talk soon.
I'm down. It also makes me think about whose book was that? The People's History.
Yeah,
of the
Howard Zinn.
Indigenous-
It's one.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the one on Indigenous. You're talking about Roxanne
the woman.
Dunbar.
Yeah.
Ortiz.
Yeah, Ortiz.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
book. She's
That's a
fiery,
great book, man. Yeah.
But that's one reason we might steer away from that title in the long run. It's been used a lot.
Yeah, and also too, the climate out here, it's like you kind of have to not say, I want to say not totally camouflage it, but you have to frame it in such a way because of the very heightened sensitivity to any revisionist history.
Yep, I know. The 1619 project versus the 1776 project.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, because I started tracking that 250 thing because they're based out down here in DC, and
that's right.
They had some funny shenanigans.
I heard a little bit. I don't know the details, but I heard it was a little bit. Because they appointed that commission during Trump, I think. It was the first term, right?
Yeah. And they try to be slick with the messaging and among other things. And so, yeah.
Cool. All right, we'll talk more.
Yeah. So, whose land? Like, what do you think is the I don't know. I'm trying to find the way to frame this. Do you think our country, beyond what we're into right now, I mean, do you think there's going to be any, quilt of America embracing all of its diversity and everything? Do you think that's ever going to be possible?
Gabe, here's the way I look at history.
Yeah.
I as someone who's taught it a lot, I think one of the problems with all of us is that we create these grand narratives, and so we say our country's doing this, our country's going the right direction, the wrong direction, and I don't disagree with that framing, and I agree with Eric about the sort of the nosedive. However, I think the solution always lies in the local. And I think in any case in history, in any moment in history, you can always find people living the world that you think is the world you want to build toward. And you got to find those people.
Yeah.
And same thing in good times, things are going great. You're going to find the bad people are there. They didn't just come out of nowhere, And so this is going to sound a little Pollyanna or something, but you got to build it one person and one group and one community at a time. Doesn't mean you can't. It doesn't mean we can't and we shouldn't have a credible national movements, and we all want to build toward that, nor that we want to have a Congress and a president that reflect the ideals we think we should be about. But I think we're already. I guess my point is, I think we're already doing what you just said. In pockets, and that stuff's not going to go away. But I don't think it's. But I think it's less dominant and pervasive than it was whenever you choose the date when things seem better. So do I think we can, if we're going the wrong direction in general, we can sort of turn it up? I mean, I don't think we have a choice. Right. I mean, that's the other answer is, yeah, we better. Let's just do it. It's like the climate.
Yeah.
Is the climate, are we going to, is the world going to end because of climate? Is it too late? Well, you can't say it's too late because we still got to live. So
Right. We still got to try. Yeah. And then I think too, man, like just given the nature of this country's history and origin, any major change, there's unfortunately a measure of bloodshed to it, like people will fight for their ideals, whether we, bad or good, obviously Civil War. But people will, there's always an unfortunate violent aspect to it,
Well,
change.
I hear the kid in the bushes in the Meltzer's house speaking a little bit right now, with a gun in your hand. I mean, it can get dark quickly. I've heard conversations after the election about people saying, I'm going to go out and get a gun because I'm scared for my family. I need to know how to protect myself. And why do they have all the guns? And it's, I don't know. I mean, that's a whole nother.
No, that's a whole other conversation, And listen, for one, I'm like, I believe that without any, change is always going to have some unfortunate violence to it in this country. I just believe that's just me believing that, And so, as we talk about what a better future looks like, I have to factor that in on some level because nothing, in my mind, nothing comes without some measure of struggle or bloodshed in this country. I mean, all the fights that had to happen in order to get basic rights and amendments and stuff, and not the ones that made the news,
I mean, so. I agree with that in general as a historical fact, but I think you got to be, in my opinion, take this as you will, but I think you got to be really careful when we use words like bloodshed to mean exactly what we mean. I don't mean we should avoid using them for fear of being violent, but I mean, a Civil War bloodshed is different than a murder. Both of them are awful, but or people firing guns at each other. So, like we know, lots of people got killed in the civil rights movement. That's probably your point, right? Even this nonviolent movement, right? And we know the stories of King, like, oh, he's nonviolent. And one of my advisors who wrote a book on the March on Washington. Well, also, no, he tells a story. He talked to one of the guys who was with King, and he tells a story. The guy who interviewed tells a story about, King would stay during whatever travel he was doing, and someone would put him up in their house. So they come back, and that's where all the guys met. And so they come back to the house, and they open the door and they go to the living room, and he couldn't find a place to sit because there were guns on every single chair. And this is from King, And you're right. This goes back to Reconstruction and after, and during the rise of Jim Crow. It goes on and on. I agree, but I just think we got to be precise with our language here, because to say we need an armed, say, revolution is different, and we might, but that's different than saying have self-defense and carry guns.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need an armed revolution. I mean, I'm just saying, we have to be mindful that could be in the mix and not be caught out there. That's what I'm saying. Okay. I'm not saying.
What do you think, Eric?
Well, I think it's the end of an empire. I think it's our turn. I think that we've been lucky, our generation, to not have to go through what our parents went through specifically.
Domestic
and
terrorism.
I'm just praying, but I don't believe it, that all of us have to suffer because all of us aren't working from the same sheet of music.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to go through this. I wish we wouldn't have to be a Syria or a Damascus, but I don't see it going anywhere but that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sad thing. And I have to look at what our forefathers thought about. It's like we're used to things happening instantaneously instead of working for things and knowing we can only drive it so far and hand off the baton for someone to take it further. We might not see the change that we want to see within our lifetime. And that's the hard thing to come to terms with. And in that
Yeah, that's
people are unwilling to make the sacrifice. They would rather say, no, I'm just going to stand on the sideline. I've done all the way, or I'm happy with what I have. I'm not trying to make it better for the people that are coming after me.
I agree. I agree with that. And I think struggle, I think bravery, I think even bravery to the extent that maybe your life's on the line. That's the kind of commitment you're talking about. And it's really hard to put yourself, most of us in our generation, there. And I think that's true. I would just, look, as a kid, that in my own way, a kid, I mean like teens, 20s, had my own stuff about Black culture. I worshipped, as like a Malcolm X over a King, like I thought that was really cool, right? And the thing is, as someone who's, and you love the Nat Turners of the world, and you love the revolutionaries, they didn't lie down and let this stuff happen. But as an older man, and someone who's taught this stuff, I think first of all, Malcolm X was not violent. Right? He said by any means necessary. There's a picture of him that people love to throw around where he's holding a pistol. But the guy had put more energy into stopping riots than starting them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you think of the Black Muslims, like their focus on discipline and peace was really at the center of it. And there's a reason that Malcolm X gets he's like, and it becomes the symbol for gangster rap, for example, like he's just going to kick ass because he was such a truth teller and he had no apology for it. And as far as King goes, like that kind of carrying guns and being ready to defend yourself, the deacons of defense or whoever was around him, like this stuff is key. But it doesn't mean that, to me, the brilliance of King too was that it's not that he was a hypocrite, it's that he kept preaching nonviolence because that was the goal. At the same time, knowing that if someone's going to attack you, you got to defend yourself. And I think there's a big difference. And I think that we should be, if we get to that struggle that you guys are both talking about, we all should be preaching nonviolence, even if we have to defend ourselves. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Not to say we all have to kiss each other, turn the other cheek. I'm just saying it's hard to keep your head. It's hard, and we should be doing that work.
Yeah. And more people should be doing it. Okay, let's talk about the Panthers. Like we can talk about King and Malcolm, but we got to throw the Panthers in the equation. And I feel, in my learning about them, I mean, yeah, it was sort of like they were trying to have this balance. Okay, we have the free lunch programs, we're gonna uplift the community and stuff like that, but yeah, we're gonna exercise our 2A rights, and to the point where gun legislation, ironically, was as a result of them, and then there's
Reagan,
subsequent,
under the Republicans of all people, right?
Yeah, and then sadly their targeted destruction, that preyed upon a lot.
Well, that's
of
the thing.
things.
Way more violence was committed against Black Panthers than they committed ever against anybody.
Yeah. Shout out to Fred Hampton. I mean, he was trying to bring people together, but that was an assassination.
No question.
Well, everyone that was a Black leader in that time died from the bullet.
Yep.
And and on the flip side is this. From living in New York, like I lived in New York for years, whether it's 125th or 42nd Street, you had the the Black Israelites, or some other radical groups talking, all this destruction and everything else. But it was just, it's folly, because what's the game plan afterwards?
Well,
what's
that's right.
What's your economic plan for sustainment?
That's right. Well, this is where I'd like, sorry, Gabe, just to say about, like, if you think about Huey Newton, for example, right?
Yeah.
Huey Newton talked about armed revolution, but he always had in mind an armed revolution with his white allies. He was smart. It was strategic, and he understood that it was a working class, right? It was a Marxist kind of thing. So it wasn't just like, we're going to just kill the pigs. Like that could be said to stir people up in the media, but it was, the idea of actually. Right. It was coalition building at the right time, and whether we agree with that or not, but there was discipline, I guess, at the end of the day in that.
I mean, we're on this planet. If God, the universe, the source, wanted to make everybody look the same, be the same, I think God, the creator, and its infinite, would have done that. Here we are. We got to figure it out.
That's right.
If the poor whites and the middle class and the poor blacks or what have you ever got together, the top 10% would have no, they would have no chance. But the way things work now, I mean, people pick who votes for them. We're pitted against each other, and
Yep.
until
Yep.
there's some sort of leadership akin or in, I mean, we look at the black community, it's hard to find the leadership. And I've had conversations with people, they say, well, it's spread out, it's not centralized. But with all the access that we have to material things, that's what drives us. That's what drives
Yep.
society. That's what splits us apart.
Now it's the algorithm.
Yeah.
Right.
Everything's about
It's
the
AI.
algorithm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Driven by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we go. I've mentioned this before. Like, yeah, we probably need like an alien invasion from the galaxy to really bring people together for a common cause. Because
Yeah. Right.
in that regard, and again, who frames the conversation and stuff. But yeah, but to your point, you said something earlier, about awareness, and to me, that's really, um, for me, like you're somebody who really embraced their shaker experience in a way, and it doesn't mean just because like you got an African American doctorate or anything like that, but the fact that you were open, receptive, asked questions,
Mm.
and were present. Because I could say there's quite a few of our classmates, yeah, shaker, yeah, but
Right. Right.
but that's about the extent of it, and for
Yeah.
me, I've always said, for me to judge, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to know, well, what's your personal life like, like. So if you're talking all that DEI stuff and your personal life does not reflect that in a meaningful way, your words are hollow to me.
I agree. And don't get me started on Robin DiAngelo, man. I have some.
Yes.
I do not. That's not how I approach this stuff at all.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's a trip out here. And then obviously, within our own communities, the organizations that want to step up and be the Moses for the people, and sometimes they're talking loud, saying nothing. And then everything is, cream. Cash rules everything around us. I mean,
Yeah.
we live in a psychotic capitalistic society. We all got to figure out how much of the, what steps of that do we have to take in order to move forward and stuff. Pick your battles.
There has to be consequence, and we have to see it before there's any motivation for change. And without that, people are not going to leave their comfort zones.
Right on. Yep.
For
Well,
real
they've
change.
been groomed. I mean, they've been groomed. For the last 40, 50 years, we've been groomed. Some of us, have been groomed. The population, you think about it. I think about that Dave Chappelle skit about current events and stuff, and like that, how we go to the cult of personality with celebrities. Let's ask Ja Rule. Ja Rule, what do you think about the situation in the Middle East? I don't give a fuck about Ja Rule's opinion on the Middle East. But that's kind of how it gets into shit, yeah.
And Trump plays upon that by bringing the Herschel Walkers or
Right.
people from Fox. It's a personality thing. And America, gets caught in that trap, and they go right along with it.
Yeah,
True.
yeah.
Or 49.7% of them did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I just want that, and it's another thing. It's like context and perspective.
Yeah.
He won the
I'd
election
say-
by a point and a half. Point and a half.
Yeah.
That's it.
But we need a multi-party system. This two-party system, it's broken. It's broken. Two-party system is broken. Because I still feel that whether it's the red or the blue or the red, there's still not enough accountability by the people toward these people who have been elected to office, because how come they get the best health care benefits? How come they get to vote for their salary increases? You know? So there's all these other anomalies. How come DC and Puerto Rico can't be their own sovereignties, within the United States? So,
How come they're forming the next round of tax cuts based on our making cuts to our safety net?
Yeah, right. There you go.
or, veterans, like these two bozos that are like, oh yeah, we need to cut the VA programs. I understand, like, yeah, you might need to make some modifications on certain things, but you start fucking with veteran benefits, you're going to have the bonus March remix
Yeah, right.
that will make January 6th look like a fucking training exercise.
I think he's putting the fear in everyone's hearts right now, so they'll think twice about protesting or anything of that ilk, because he's going to put the military out there in ways that, as in his own words, in ways that have never been seen before, like no other.
And that's going to be very interesting, because there will probably be dissension in the rank, and you might have some skirmishes amongst service members.
Yeah, I think about that. I mean, and I don't want to. This gets really dark, but like, thinking about like when coups have happened, when revolutions have happened, it's always been the military is always key, and it's never been 100% of the military. So, that's where it would happen.
Yeah. I mean, and
it's split. I mean, you get all these generals, Republicans and Democrats and whatever, all in between, saying, that they're afraid of Trump and that they don't trust that he's, gonna be a trustworthy, fully democratic leader. And the ranks gave you no more than the rest of us, all the common veterans and enlistees and all that stuff. Like they don't necessarily agree with those generals, right?
Yeah. But if they hit the wrong button related to veteran benefits, and if it's and I'm generalizing here, and if the majority of those veterans who have these benefits impacted, who are ones that maybe voted for him and drink that Kool-Aid, it's going to be very interesting to see where their loyalty is going to lie when you start messing with their monies. Everybody's on the teat. Everybody's on the teat. So you start messing with people's money, or they say the church's money. People start to get ideas. Start to wake up. Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting going forward. All we can do is do our part.
It's going to be painful.
Out of pain comes growth. Growth.
Yeah.
If you choose to look at it that way, you just try to lessen the pain. Yes. In that way.
Well,
Jamie.
Yeah.
I told you about your old name back in the day.
That's right.
Jamie.
It's a lot. No, don't apologize. I like Jamie. I've grown up enough to be like, it's all good. My family still calls me Jamie.
Yeah.
That was another thing that changed junior high school. All the boys that I was friends with couldn't call me Jamie anymore. It was too emasculating or something.
Yeah.
The girls couldn't call me James. It was too formal. So I was Jamie throughout, to a lot of people throughout, even throughout high school. But
did you ever feel a type of way about that Van Halen song, Jamie's Crying? Did anybody ever tease you with that?
Jamie's crying. Yeah, every now and then.
Yeah. This is random.
That was the thing. I mean, Jamie is definitely probably more common with girls than boys. I didn't like that.
No, but it's a good neutral name.
I like it.
I was thinking about playing "When the Levee Breaks" by Led Zeppelin.
That's a good song.
As your walk-up music.
I had a brief moment in a frat, and when I say brief, I mean about a week. My roommate in freshman year was a huge beer drinker, and so this beer drinking frat recruited him, and he ended up being the president 4 years later. But he recruited me, and so we did all the hazing, which is ridiculous. But all the brothers had to name the pledges, and my pledge nickname was "Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry." Every time they talk to me, they had to say that whole phrase.
Oh shit, that's funny.
Yeah.
So you're in Rhode Island now. Got your nonprofit up. Yeah, man. So
Yeah.
the mission continues.
Well, it does, and I might be posting stuff on the Facebooks
Yeah,
about this to you guys, to the class. Shaker is a real good font of ideas and collaboration and things like that, as it was
yeah,
for the Black Suburbia thing. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm
yeah,
I'm now trying to raise money and trying to keep these programs going. And in terms of the conversation we just had about Trump and this new era, it's interesting because you guys are talking about the struggle and the hurt and even the violence that may have to come, and I'm still thinking about this thing you do with your hands, Gabe.
Well, being a Black person, I don't mean to interrupt you. It's very
Yeah.
hurtful to see like half the country feeling a certain kind of way from an indifferent standpoint, and it's just, man, I just feel like my safety is
Listen,
at risk.
we had
revered and reviled. That's who we are.
I have my board is a combination of, there's a white woman and this indigenous guy and a Black guy who's on it, and we had our first board meeting after the election, and it was really interesting to hear my native friend and my black friend on the board speak, and I was devastated by the election, but man, it was a whole other level. So this is what you're talking to, I think, Eric, and there is it made me aware, God, if everything I'm doing for a living right now, everything I'm devoting my life to, even I wasn't, I feel this is where the privilege comes in or something, right? This sort of the blind, even me, I was blind to how much more painful and fear inducing this thing was to, frankly, people of color.
To me, it's levels of latitude to be able, to be operational, and because unfortunately, that's the first thing they look for is us, is the melanin, and that's the most dominant identifier. And then they go into the nuances of who's next and so forth and so on. Doesn't lessen, your fears or concerns, but yeah, there's a latitude.
I'm on the front lines in front of the firing squad. Yeah, that's what my indigenous, he's Oneida from Wisconsin, and he said after the election, one of his other indigenous friends who lives in Syracuse now was like, it's going to be fine, and what's the big deal? And he's like, he looked at him and he said, "Oh, I know why you're saying that, because you look white. You can pass as white." He says, "I can't. I look like an Indian. I can't do that."
Right.
And so that's why you're cool about it, and I'm not. And I'm pissed, I'm terrified, and depressed, and all of the above.
Yeah. As we say, the connection to the complexion.
Oh, actually, she's got a date.
Yeah.
The guy my mom introduced me to at the wedding.
About the Schomburg. I enjoyed that.
Can I stop? I hate to stop. Can we get a time what's our? We were going for 2 hours, which is awesome. This is great conversation, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it just.
But, should I tell my family? Can we get 10 minutes?
Whatever you want to stop. We can.
Yeah, whatever you want to stop, bro. Yeah. Because I know we could go on and on and on.
Well, let's end on that then. What were you going to ask about the show?
I can't say enough. I really appreciated the opportunity to be a part of that exhibit that you brought to the Schomburg at that time. I wish I could go back to the Schomburg and go through every fucking photo file.
Find your photograph?
Yes, of me, Pat Walker, Greg Fuller, Keith Asamoto. And I long since forgot that woman's name. But yeah.
Deidre?
I don't know who that was who was handling that stuff. But
man, I can't. That's one of my great. All this work I've been doing, there's a couple occasions, 2, and that was one of them. It's heartbreaking to think that you entrusted the project. What Eric? He's talking about. He gave us a whole bunch of pictures.
Yeah, he shared that with me. Yeah.
And Gabe, I haven't given up either. In fact, I found a box that maybe in some envelope there's a ton of files in it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's there, so don't get your hopes up. But I'm going to go through it for the second time. The last time I looked was a few years ago, but it's awful. It's like the nightmare of I hope it's a nightmare for them too, when an archive gets, or let's say someone doing an exhibit, and they have this sort of loan that they're going to return, and then they lose the stuff.
Yeah, it's up there, man. If it's not in your, if it's not in there, it's up there, probably stuck behind some other photos or misfiled. I'm gonna go up there one day. I'm gonna go up there one day. Yeah. Yes. But all right.
We have it. By the way, you know that we have a copy of it, probably, right? Maybe we never even talked about this.
No.
Because everything, I think everything, or almost everything, was digitized. So I think we have a scan of it somewhere.
Really? Oh, that'd be great.
I think so. I think I didn't even think of that before, but that's maybe the first thing I should do.
Look for the old hard drive. Yeah.
Well, I think there's there's a Dropbox. I can go back and look at, because I think there were hundreds of documents and photos that were scanned.
Okay.
I wonder if that included all of your pictures or just the ones that we displayed.
Yeah.
It wasn't part of the display, was it? Was it part of the display itself?
I think it might have been the display, and there might have been a couple of letters that my brother wrote.
Well, you got the letters back.
Yeah, I did get the letters back. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it was the
letters are amazing, by the way. It's if the picture you want, this isn't exactly riveting podcast content, but let's do this. We'll do this offline.
Yeah. We'll catch up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, James Levy, it's been amazing.
Eric Green.
It's been an amazing conversation. I can't believe we've gone 2 hours, and it doesn't even seem like that.
Oh yeah, we could go longer, but
yes, on and on to the break of dawn, another time. But thank you for joining us on the Shaker Heights Experiences May Vary podcast. Next week, we have Scott Ferguson, class of '83.
Right on.
Yes.
Thank you guys, this was great.
All right.
Thank you.
Until next time. Thank you, everybody. You guys out there, have a happy holidays. Don't get caught up in the pressure of the holidays. You got to buy gifts for everybody and all that other stuff. Find some self-time for self-care, self-love, and reflection. Every day is Thanksgiving. So on that note, we'll see you next time. On the Shaker Heights, experiences may vary. But most importantly, lastly, if we can stop the music real quick, I want to give condolences to the Knight family for their loss of Michael Knight. All of came from a big family. People know all the different, they know Sheila, Herman, and other folks. But we send out our condolences, Fred. Yeah. We send out our sincere condolences to the Knight family for their loss of Michael Knight. Okay. All right.
All right.
Until next time.
Until next time.
See you then.
All right, guys.